Rob McMullen was the candidate for the United Australia Party for the seat of Griffith. He was a lot more effective than the results showed, and he is not stopping in his work and is already out there in the community planning for wonderful new events, and I hope to be at the next one you've got coming up. Rob McMullen, welcome back to Jason Q Citizen and Friends.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks for having me again. I really do hope you can make it. It's going to be great. I'd love to plug it before we get off the end of this show. But we should probably do some content first.
Well, it will certainly mean that more people will want to come along, because once they hear what you've got to say, they're going to want to hear and see more. But it is wonderful that you're out there in the community already, getting out and putting people together, because there has been a great shift at least grassroots level, and a little bit more than that, because we're seeing there's a big protest now planned this Saturday in New Zealand. We're just working to get in touch with the organiser there. Hopefully we'll get him on the show on Friday. It's very, very exciting now, because this is going against the grain. And yesterday, Rob, I had Mac from the Reclaim the Line rallies on the program, and he's also talking about the process of the rally starting up again for different reasons, and he's also announced that he will be having a tilt at perhaps running in the New South Wales elections next year. So it's very exciting. We've gone through the first process, and now we're maturing, coming out the other side. And we've also got a lot more to offer now, because the runs are on the board. We've pointed out where the problems were. It's all coming true. And now the next phase is coming in, and people are starting to realise that they may have been hoodwinked. How are you seeing things sort of changing over the last couple of months post-election?
Well, look, it is very exciting, and it does need to be done. Look, for me, I think it would be it's something I want to do, is to create that community, a sense of community and the social aspect, to foster genuine, authentic grassroots relationships with people. Because in the last campaign, we really went in cold. You know, people had no idea who I was. We were meeting new people and working out cooperative relationships. Whereas I think that in the future, it would be so much more effective with people that we do have organic relationships and rapport with, you know. And I think it really does need to happen. And it does. We do need to have our eye on the future. You know, fortune favors the brave. And, you know, in today's, you know, society, even if, you know, I don't even think you necessarily need to be brave. It's almost that fortune favors those who can be bothered. You know what I mean? And that's what I definitely saw with the Greens is, you know, there wasn't a huge amount of sort of bravery or substance, but it just the coordination of people that can be bothered. You know, there is a political landscape out there for the taking, that there is political power that should be wielded for the good, benevolently. And look, I think there are so many great people now. Like I had no idea who you were before the campaign, and now we chat regularly. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person soon. And same with so many candidates, and even just making those really organic connections in my own city of Brisbane has just been amazing. I'm still in contact with people. You know, things are still brewing, and I can only imagine how much more authentic and effective a campaign would be with, like I said, with groups of people, of all of us who have organic relationships and friendships and understandings. I think it will be very positive for the future, but also to have community, because community gives us strength, community gives us self-esteem, community gives us support, and elements of community mentoring is something I want to look forward to in the future as well. It's something I've really got my eye on. Like I said, I'd like to talk about that later. But look, I think it needs to happen. It is happening. It's a great thing, and I'm very positive. Well,
I think it's a wonderful concept. It's a great idea. It's something that everyone is screaming out for, and it's not unprecedented. A good local church here in my area is growing week on week, and whilst the service might finish at 11 o'clock in the morning, fellowship continues well after lunchtime. It's quite incredible when people of like mind get together, share ideas and concept, and build community. And this is exactly what we're talking about. If anything, if I could rewind the clock, Rob, just based on what you're saying now, and it just seems to me a lot more sense. It would have been wonderful if we could have all started this campaigning perhaps 2 years earlier, not from the idea that we were going to run, but for the purpose of building community leading up to the election of 2022. And I reckon it would have been a very different result.
I learned that from the Greens candidate that won in my electorate, and as you know, the whole city of Brisbane's gone green. My opponent Max, who won, he helped a councillor get into local council and was involved in the party a couple of years prior. And so his family had been in community work. And look, at the end of the day, politics, you're really putting your hand up to be a community leader. You're asking a community to grant you a leadership role to serve their best interests, and you're severely behind the eight ball if nobody knows who you are. And so if you have an interest in wielding political power, you need to be out there working with your community who's going to grant it to you, and that's one thing I absolutely learned off the Greens is they had that long-term strategy. They had that prior work with the community, and it really paid off for them.
Yes, I agree with you. And just to sort of reflect back on yesterday's interview with Mac, who was the rally organiser, he announced a couple of weeks ago, and he announced yesterday on my program that he's joined One Nation and has had many conversations with Mark Latham over the past couple of years, at least through this rally process. And it was Mark Latham that actually encouraged him to join the party and put his hand up and have a shot at the upper house next year, which is very encouraging. Mac, of course, is a little bit circumspect, perhaps thinking that he might not be worthy or get the nod, but there's a fellow who has built a decent sized profile, certainly in our community, but has the ability to be able to speak to people on all levels, from his vast experience as a school teacher, as a coach, obviously as a rally organizer, and just an ability to be just a normal person from the community who really cares about it. And an upper house opportunity is also interesting because you don't campaign necessarily in one area, but across the entire state. So it's a very different process again. So it'll be more brand recognition, but it really is exciting when there are so many opportunities, because in the old days of politics, if you weren't Labor or Liberal and perhaps Green and not even One Nation, perhaps Green over the last 20 years, you may have a very slim chance in your lifetime of ever becoming a candidate to run in either lower or upper house and have a reasonable chance of winning. So we are at a really great time, aren't we? That we can at least have a shot and make of it as whatever we can.
I think so, and obviously, alternate forms of media in general have exploded because of the availability of technology and smartphones and the internet. And so obviously getting a profile politically is no different, to any other sort of profile. And so that's going to help as well. So yeah, look, we are in a great time. It needs to happen. I'm looking forward to it. You're looking forward to it. I'm actually really excited about the prospect of a future campaign with so many high quality friends that I have now in the know, working together. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, this is where it gets really exciting. This is what we were looking forward to, what would be the outcome of our defeat. And of course, it only leads experience and loss only leads closer to the next big victory. It's very exciting. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rob, I want to get into some of your latest thinkings, particularly on the link between science and ideology, and how all of a sudden we're getting very confused in the authoritative level because the hive mind seems to be taking over everything. In the meantime, do not go anywhere. This is TNT Radio.
Instead of putting a cracker under a politician, why not some TNT? Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to the Jason Q Citizen and Friends program. I'm here with Rob McMullen. Yesterday, Rob, I had the great delight of attending court to defend a mask mandate fine that I wore about 12 months ago. And I had an exemption, but didn't show it to the police officer when he knocked on the door of a private business, and I answered the door without a mask on. And 12 months later, I go to court and got off, which was a wonderful feeling. But I was on the show yesterday with Mike Ryan before mine, and the promo that just played then about putting a TNT under a politician, and I was just a little bit off. I wasn't listening to it at the time, but then I just heard it then, and I thought, yeah, you know what? There needs to be a lot more TNT under our politicians and perhaps under our entire system. But Having said all of that, Rob, where are we headed now in this world of science gone mad?
Well, let's put some TNT under the scientists and the credentialists, because I'll give away the conclusion at the start just to correctly frame it. I think what we're seeing in our institutions a lot is runaway credentialism. Now, I'm a musician, right? And I can tell you that being a musician is a very organic skill set. You're either a good musician or you're not, and
yes.
you can have some talent, you can get better. But there are some people who just never really have what it takes, and they can still get music degrees. I've had a lot of experience with these people. Now, just because you have the degree that says you've done a music degree or whatever, doesn't mean you're a good musician. I hate to be a bit of a dick about it, but that's the truth.
Yep.
And so that's what credentialism is thinking that the credentials maketh the man, And what we've seen in the institutions is that the credentials have taken the place of demonstrable merit. And we're seeing this runaway institutional credentialism. Now, one of the standout experiences in my campaign I had was a very interesting conversation with a guy who was running for a Senate position as part of the Fusion Party. I'm not sure who they were, but they seemed like just a very standard kind of sciencey party. We're secular humanists, we're the science party. So I kind of had a bit of a reputation for not being afraid of a bit of a debate. And so some of the IMOP people came up and said, "Oh, Rob, this guy here is pro-mandate." And I said, "Okay." So, and I said to him, "Look, mate, so let's just go through this. Do you think that vaccine injuries are a conspiracy theory, or do you accept they're real?" And he's like, "No, I fully accept it." And I said, "Okay, so how can you explain to me how you can be pro-mandate then?" He said, "Well, we do things every day that carry risk." I'm like, "Okay, such as, what are you talking about?" "Oh, I drive my car." I said, "Okay, but nobody's forcing you to drive your car." You know what I mean? Nobody's coercing you to. And I said to him, if we look at the word coercion, if it was applied in any of the ways that we were coerced to get the vaccines, if any of those same techniques were applied, say, by a husband wanting his wife to not leave, and he applied the exact same methods and pressures on her, we'd say that is a domestic violence situation because it's coercion. So I said, I'm very happy. So we're just going through a bit of a Socratic reasoning method. Just, okay, we can use the word coercion. I'm happy with that definition. So are you coerced in any particular day to use your car? No, you're not, in the same way. And he said, "Oh, there's a principle of risk minimization." And I said, "So do you think it just comes down to that if the vaccine is going to be beneficial for more people, if there's a smaller percentage of people that it's not beneficial and harmful for, then that's just a useful trade-off?" No, I wouldn't say that. But then he said, yes, essentially that's it. And so we kind of just kept going through, and he started challenging me. He said, "Well, if you don't have a degree in science, you don't have the qualifications to have this conversation with me," because he'd studied physics, you see. And I said, "Well, how does your qualification?" I said, "Well, that's beside the point. I think I read a lot of science. I'm quite well aware of a lot of science. And my knowledge on any of these scientific concepts is not going to change or become less valid because I don't have the credential, because I don't have it written on a paper that says I've got the degree. People write papers, they write books. We can all access the same books by leading scientists equally, And I also threw back at him and said, "Look, how does your qualification in physics allow you to judge vaccine, effectiveness?" I can't remember the job description, the vaccinologist or whatever. And that, once again, that was a bypass, as an inconvenient point as well. But we kept drilling down to it. And he said, "Look, at the end of the day, I take a risk every time I walk outside my home so you can get vaccinated." And so I spent about probably 10, 15 minutes with this guy, just going step by step. And look, it's a very fascinating process, because what you need to do with people is there's a truth there's a truth that they're operating from, a value that they're operating from, an ideology that they're operating from, but they like to layer it in all these fancy justifications. So what you do is you chip away, and you just keep asking. And if they don't implode the conversation, you will get to the truth. They will admit what truth they perceive and that they're acting from. And he said, I take a risk every time I go outside my house so you can get vaccinated. And we'd already gone through that the vaccines don't cause transmission, and which after the campaign has only become even more apparent, and the injuries are more apparent, and the ineffectiveness is even more apparent. So we're definitely proven right. But I certainly had enough to make the case in that time. But despite that, he said, basically, I'm scared. I'm scared so you can get vaccinated. Now, the funny thing is,
Sorry, Rob, just hold that thought. We're just going to pause for news headlines because I want to continue this after the break. There's a lot more we want to get into. Don't go anywhere. You're on TNT Radio. Welcome back to Jason Q, Citizen and Friends. Rob, I cut you off there for the news headlines, but we're talking about credentialism, which is a wonderful new term, even though it's not really, but it's a new term to bring into the conversation, because in the next hour I'll be interviewing Dr. William Bay, who is exactly now a victim of credentialism, in that a medical doctor is being told that he can no longer be a medical doctor because he's speaking out against administration that says that you can't speak out because it would erode public trust. And this is in a world whereby top down there aren't any doctors who are distributing the vaccine to the people. If you go from the World Health Organization, you've got Tedros, he's a PhD, not an MD. You've got obviously Bill Gates, who's funding the whole thing. He's a businessman and a computer guy. You've got in Australia ScoMo and Albo. Well, ScoMo was the Prime Minister that oversaw it, obviously not a doctor. Greg Hunt, the Health Minister, was not a doctor, who let the TGA approve a drug without even looking at the data. Who, by the way, their leader, John Skerritt, not a medical doctor, and on and on and on it goes. It's quite scary, isn't it? So credentialism suits when the peanut gallery, as it were, get to determine and to go along with authority, and yet authority itself is not qualified, and yet they play behind another banner of credentialism, which is process. And it's the process of being elected that allows them to say and do whatever they want and get this system to work, and therefore create an establishment. It's quite frightening when you think about it quite deeply and you look at the overall structure. So here we are at a normal level, if we can continue the conversation where we left off before the break, where credentialism has allowed this person to lose the debate and then stand up and say, well, I win because I'm a scientist and you're not. That's really what he said, wasn't it?
He didn't win because we ended up getting down to the bottom of it and he walked away. But the point is that, once again, once we chip away through all the justifications, all the layers of justifying their position, what you get down to is their self-interest. Now, science is a via negativa discipline. It cannot prove, it can only disprove. Now, that's very, there are things that we take for granted as most likely true, but technically science can only disprove. And what we're left with is probable, possible, maybe even probable truth candidates. So the point is that when something comes along like COVID and you've got risk either way, you have a risk either way. There's risk to lockdowns, there's financial risk, there's not seeing your family in final moments, there is mental health risks, there are business risks, there are developmental risks. There's some people had risk of COVID, some people have risk of the vaccine. There's risk flying all over the place. There is no scientific reason why risk should be allocated either way. Now, let me put that another way. So the person I was speaking to, what in essence happened is that underneath all his justifications, he said, you should do what I say because that is my self-interest. Now, that is not a scientific position at all. There is no scientific reason why his self-interest trumps my self-interest. That is not scientific. But what is happening is that people's self-interest, their moral strategies, the things that are good for them, they are dressing them up in the language of science and in the clothing of science and the credentials of science, so that they can basically give their self-interest an advantage over yours by saying that theirs is valid and yours isn't. But that's not scientifically provable at all. You know, I mean, if you want to be completely brutal, you know, like I said, science is a via negativa discipline. It can disprove things, but it's not going to give you a positive value. And so as such, there is no reason why, let's talk Darwinian survival of genes. If you want to talk about the greater good, well, why on one hand is the greater good supposedly vaccinating everybody and bearing a cost of a percentage of people being damaged with the vaccines? Why is not the greater good those who do survive COVID without a vaccine living on and creating a stronger gene pool? There is no, you have to be working from a positive value, and science cannot give you that, because our brains evolved acquisitionism. This is a new term in psychology. Acquisitionism. Our brains are geared to acquire positive value as beings that live, seek resources and status for the purpose of reproduction. So everything that we do, that we seek, is seeking a positive value. But science cannot define for you why one organism's positive value is more valid than another. You see what the problem is here. So what they're doing is dressing up their self-interest within credentialed language to give their self-interest the more social power or more social validity than yours. But it's a house of cards. It's not scientifically valid at all, because science is only ever going to resort to facts, not positive values.
You know, the other component, or the other side of this, of course, is that credentialism, based on everything that you've just explained, is adopting the exact same business model as racism does. It's excluding someone else based on someone else feeling superior. And they're using intellectualism as the excuse to justify what they're saying. It's the policy or practice of exclusion. You will do as I say.
Yep. Well, you know, exclusion, I think it's just, like you said, do what I say, because I think my self-interest, what's good for me is more valid than what's good for you. Whereas if you want to understand what my great solution to all this is there has to be reciprocity. There has to be tests of reciprocity and cooperation. And that is, once again, it's not necessarily a scientific proclamation, but from my value set, that is the most desirable state of affairs. And that's what I took into the campaign, is saying, okay, you know, if I break down my rational self-interest, I got over COVID and it was the biggest nothing burger of my life. Yet I know people in my life who've been vaccine injured. So my self-interest is the polar opposite to what you want me to do. Are you going to force me and call it science? It's not science, it's a facade of science. But what's really going on is as I was saying to people, how are you going to cooperate? How are you going to create a cooperative win-win? How are you going to create reciprocity between your self-interest and my self-interest, where we see them being complete opposites? And that's largely, you know, what was happening is that certain groups had the political power to steamroll other people's self-interest and to coerce other people into doing what they want. But the idea that it's scientific is a joke. It's not.
It really isn't, is it? And we sit here and just roll with it, don't we? But we're working out
Absolutely.
new ways of being able to get that point across. And it is these philosophical discussions in which we're able to uncover the cracks in the thinking and the flaws in the way that this system is working. And what we're seeing now in real time is that more and more people coming from these professional bodies, these institutions, are leaving in droves. So
yes.
Another example is that the police officers who are now mandated to take the fourth jab. So you now have police officers retiring early, quitting the force. They're saying enough is enough. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, we, as I said, we're going to talk to a doctor the next hour who's prepared to walk away from his entire career, all that training. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that you can just walk away from any amount of training in any skill set, but why wouldn't you? I mean, Mac yesterday was a school teacher. He talked about the idea of when he walks back into the school now that he's permitted to go back to teaching, he doesn't want to, because
I'm not surprised.
How could you? I mean, you can feel the indoctrination. You can feel, he said, the eyes upon me. They know who I am. They know what I was up to. And it just doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. So I can imagine there must be many, many frustrated practicing doctors thinking, I can't do this anymore. It's beyond me. I mean, even talking with legal practitioners, and there's many things that they don't want to do because they can no longer reason inside the courtroom. It's like they can't see it anymore. So this is a process of credentialism that isn't just scientific, is it? This is across all institutions, as you were alluded to in the beginning of this discussion, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, we've talked about the empathetic left-wing sort of herd morality people, and the more right-wing systematic masculine people, and that's the problem. Is you're getting empathetically brained people who, once again, they tend towards being more blind to systems, systematically blind. So how can you be filling up the institutions with people who are more empathetically herd morality minded and systematically blind, yet putting them in lab coats? Science is a system. You can't put people who are blind to systems as the people representing a system. You know what I mean? It's absurd.
Yes.
I'll just, there's another little quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's another very annoying person, but he said it as an amazing thing. He said, one of the most amazing things is there's been a scientific explosion over the last few decades where it's something like 99% of all the scientists that have ever lived have come about in the last 30 or 40 years or something. But you're not getting an explosion of 160 IQ, autistic, systematically brained Darwins, because that's just the numbers of bell curves and population genetics and stuff. You're not getting that. What you're getting is masses of people doing paint by numbers degrees, following the herd and doing what the authorities tell them and calling them science.
Yeah. It's the opposite. I mean? It's counterintuitive,
right.
Correct?
That's right. Like I said, we haven't had an explosion of 160 IQ people. We've had an explosion of degrees being watered down so that more and more of the population can do paint by numbers scientific degrees and then go parrot the points, the authority speaking points, and call it science. I mean, it's brutal, but that seems to be what's happening. But look, I really, before we finish up, I want to talk about the solution. I've been thinking about this a lot. And unfortunately, when people are not rational, I try to have a rational conversation with so many people saying, look, this is my rational self-interest. I understand your rational self-interest. What compromise can we come to? But it really wasn't a successful technique because a lot of people are not used to that sort of thing. How do we cooperate? How do we create a win-win with something that is really opposite to what I want? And unfortunately, when people are not logical, when they're not cooperative, it comes down to a degree of power. And you see, this is what political parties, and we saw the underhanded techniques of all the other political parties, they know they're chasing power. Now, power can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. Even the power to just stop people doing things to you that they shouldn't do for everybody's benefit is still a benevolent wielding of power. Now, there are three types of power because there are three ways of getting people to do what you want. The three ways are physical, financial, and social. Okay?
Yep.
You can physically coerce people, you can financially incentivize them, or you can socially ostracize them. And so what you see actually, and that's a whole other discussion, is this great trio of institutions that tend to arise in our civilization out of these three nodes of power, being the law and the military, or the market and the money people, or the church, each of these representing a center of power, with the market and the wealthy people representing that financial power, the law and the military representing that physical power, and the church or any other thing that functions as a church representing that social power. And so most of us do not have the capacity to gain a lot of physical power. We have, to varying degrees, the capacity to amass some financial power, and where that is possible, it should be investigated. Some of the things I would suggest are, if you run a business, like I said before, don't put up with any Marxist silliness from the people that you employ or that you do business with. Have some standards with how you trade, because it will, if you having no standards might pay you short term, but having standards will make sure you get paid long term. But the other thing I want to pursue is a degree of social power. Now, say your next guest, I would go see him for a consult, even if he was deregistered. I would happily do that. And what you need to do is have, like I said, networks. And this is, we've been talking about this for a long time, but I'm still working on this, is a degree of social power where you start social institutions, you start community building. And another thing I want to do to build this social power is offer informal mentorship, because what I saw with so many people is they need a way forward. They need a pathway to get where they want, and they often turn to these institutions, they turn to political parties, because that's the only way they know how. But what I want to do is, as a community service, is offer informal mentorship and support and community to people, so that we can start building that social base. Because that social power was one of the most potent tools we had against the coercion that they put us through for the last 2 years, and I think we need to build on that. So
yes.
With that in mind, any of your listeners, if you want to keep in touch with what I'm doing, I'll be on the show more in the future, but my Telegram, Rob McMullen on Telegram is the best place to get me. I'm completely hidden on Facebook and Twitter, even though I am still on there. But on Telegram is the best place to be. And so at the end of the month, I'm going to be holding a social event where anyone who's freedom-minded, who helped me out in the campaign, I'm really hoping you're able to attend, Jace. Maybe we can do a bit of an in-person chat, that sort of thing. But just start building those relationships, building that social power, because I wasn't surprised when COVID happened, because I saw the way things were going. I saw the values that a lot of the institutions were cultivating. So when the way they acted was not at all surprise to me. Now, I really hope they have the self-awareness to relax what they've done to people, so that we have a period of prosperity. I feel like they've harvested us and they've cracked down on us, and there's been huge wealth transfers and people have been shaken up. If they were smart, they would leave us alone for 2 to 5 years so that people could reamass some wealth, could resettle and gain some more confidence in their society. But I don't think they are very smart. And so I won't claim to be able to read the future, but it would not surprise me in the slightest is if we do have other situations in the future where they act according to the same values, which will be counter to our values. If they try to enforce their self-interest on ours, which is counter to our self-interest. And so I really think that, the political system needs a shake-up. And like I said at the start of the conversation, having that social power, these fantastic networks and real relationships with people is going to be invaluable with any political aspirations in the future. But should they decide to mess with us again, cultivating that social power, and to whatever degree we can, the financial power is going to be crucially important. And so that's really what I'm working on. And also too, it's just fun. It's just great to hang out with people who get you, who have similar values, and just, pro family, pro cooperation, pro chatting, pro normal.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely
really great.
I'm just going to quickly pause our last break for the hour. When we come back, we're going to conclude this beautiful conversation today with Rob McMullen, the former UAP candidate for the seat of Griffith, with some brilliant ideas. You are on TNT Radio.
De-weaponizing weather with...
Welcome back to the Jason Q Citizen and Friends program, speaking with Rob McMullen today. And the highlight of the hour so far is the understanding of a concept called credentialism, amongst many other highlights in the show, but it really does explain how it is that the institutions can cling on to their power and authority. And what we've been talking about is the idea of social power and a different way of being able to understand how all of these items come together, institutions and individuals, and how the individual can still maintain the power once we move into a space where we can all recognise each other and work together. Rob?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, that's the whole arc of what I wanted to say today is that, I noticed that there is this credentialism, this push, quote, the science, which is really just other people's self-interest, wearing a lab coat and telling you that their self-interest is more important than your self-interest, which is not a scientifically valid thing. And it does take a lot of questions to get to that point and realize that's all that's going on. And so what do we do with people who aren't logical? You need to be able to limit them. It is to some degree a question of power. What avenues of power do we have? Well, social power is probably for most of us, is probably one of the biggest forms of power that we can amass. And so that's what I'm working on is relationships, organic relationships and social events. I think it's all very important. Another candidate's get-together is going to happen the day after mine. I'll head out to Toowoomba and I'll go support hers and just, say to people, we've had a very wealthy and individualized society for a long time, but something has shaken us up, and it's going to remind us of a universal truth that there is strength in numbers, and find your tribe and invest in that tribe, because, things are going to happen throughout life, no matter, what happens. I mean, we know there's the whole identity bill, there's China's on the move, there's the WHO, all these forces are out there. And, I'd rather have a tribe of great people by my side, for whatever the future brings. And not only that, is I want to encourage other people to get on board with us too, through community mentorship, some community service. Now, another little pitfall I see a lot of people do is say, well, I've got this great information and you can buy it in my book. Well, each to their own, absolutely. But for myself, I don't want to be paid for any mentorship or community service. The payment I want is for people to value freedom, family, cooperation. The only payment that I want to see from people is that you share my values.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And pay it forward. And so that's another avenue that I really want to explore. And I'm starting that off at the end of this month. And any of your listeners, please get in touch with me on Telegram. I hope you guys can post my Telegram under this chat and become a part of it. We're in Brisbane. I'm planning to have just a beautiful Sunday afternoon, family-friendly freedom community barbecue where we create these organic relationships in this community for the future. Because unfortunately, there is a push towards institutional power that can flex its muscles over us for its own benefit and at the expense of our self-interest. And I want some resources behind me next time they decide to do that.
Yeah, exactly right. So have you decided, Rob, where you're holding this event, if you wanted to announce it, or should people just head over to your Telegram to find out the details when they are advertised?
Look, I'm thinking that we'll do New Farm Park on Sunday afternoon, August the 28th.
Okay, wonderful.
If anyone wants to come, please let me know in the Telegram so that we can have an idea of numbers, because I'll probably put on some food. If we're going to have sizable numbers, I'll definitely book a space. If we don't have that many, we'll just first in, best dressed it. So if you would like to come and be a part and just meet people who are active in the campaign and the freedom movement, let me know, because I can organise it better if I know what sort of numbers I'm dealing with. But that's the plan at the moment. It's August 28th, New Farm Park, 3 p.m, family-friendly afternoon. Just enjoying a beautiful spot in Brisbane with some great people.
Yeah, look, that's terrific. And the idea of the white lab coat is something to behold. I remember two very famous stories in my lifetime. A relative of mine attended a university back in the I feel like it was the late 70s. And part of the beginning parts of university is the idea of all this camaraderie or whatever is a scavenger hunt. And in the, would you believe, the legal team and the legal fraternity, whatever, they had to go around, and in one particular occasion, they had to actually get a crocodile somehow and get it into a lake, a pond, whatever it was, or they had to get one or take one or whatever. I said, how did you do that? He said, oh, it was easy. He said, white overalls and a ute. You can do a lot of stuff in white overalls and a ute. And so I said, did you win? Oh, yeah, of course we did. And that's all these cunning students came up with. And then another story years later, it involved my one of my late father's employers, and he was telling me the story that when they would go to the airport, they did a lot of interstate business, they would have an old bomb car that they would drive to the airport, and they would park it there and then drive it back to the office, and that's what they did. Well, on one occasion, they were heading off to the airport, and they said, where's the old bomb? And they realised that they'd left it at the airport from when the last trip was on. They forgot to pick it up, so the car had been in the airport car park for a matter of weeks. Mm-hmm. They'd completely forgotten about it, and so they realised that they were up for a very expensive car park fee. And I said, what did you do? He said, oh, it was easy. We turned up in white overalls and a ute, and we went and we fixed the entry gate, and we reversed the car out. And I thought, goodness me, this is the 80s and the white coat. So it's amazing what can be done in the process of theatre with people, the way that they go on. But this is the reality of a situation where institutions assume total control of everything, and the system, one way or another, has to outsmart it for its own benefit. Rob, once again, it's been a delight to chat. The Telegram group for everyone who wants to find Rob is Rob McMullen, spelled ROBMCMULLAN. Look him up. There will be a treasure trove of wonderful information, as you've heard today, and we'll continue to talk to Rob as the show goes on. And I do look forward to meeting up with you on that day, because we're heading up to beautiful Queensland in a week or so's time. Can't wait to be there. The news is coming up next.
Can't wait.
Thank you. And the news is coming up next. And when we return, Dr. William Bay will be joining me on the program to talk about the hottest news there is. Don't go anywhere. You're on TNT Radio.